Okay, can you hear me?
We can.
Oh. Okay. Right, so I'm Jess Currie. I got involved, initially I got involved with Greenwich and Lewisham Friends of the Earth in the late 80s. And we did various campaigns about global warming and, you know, safer rainforests and all kinds of things. And then gradually I started to become aware of it's been a long-standing campaign to fight the East London river crossing. Even though I lived at Blackheath Standard, you know, most of my life, I really hadn't heard much about the threat to Oxley's Woods. And so I started to get involved with that. The main people fighting it were a group called People Against the River Crossing, who had been battling this for years and who were truly amazing. They, just after I got involved, the public inquiry took place, and that ended up being the longest public inquiry into a road scheme ever. Apparently it was 194 days. I think I went to a few of the days, but the People Against the River Crossing were there every day with their, you know, reams of evidence, and yeah, they were amazing in their sort of their actions and keeping going. But as a group, Greenwich and Lewisham Friends of the Earth started to be more involved, and then we started to do more publicity. We started to reach out to Friends of the Earth groups around London and further afield. We also started to get more involved with other road schemes. So the context of this was a massive national road building programme. It's all sounding very familiar today. But and so we personally got involved with the campaign to stop the road through Twyford Down, which I have been on that road once since, and it's absolutely heartbreaking what they destroyed there. The other one was the M11 Link Road, which went through Walthamstow, and then the other one was Newbury Bypass. So all these, we were travelling to these protests. We were trying to take part in action days and things, and the sort of the feel of it was that the press didn't really leave London at that time. Newspapers, television, they didn't really leave London. So it was very hard to get those campaigns up the agenda. When we went to the protests, there would be a huge number of private security guards, small numbers of police. The security guards would be videoing any of the protesters in a very sort of threatening way, which is still happening today. And the whole thing was really, it was really nasty. It was, you know, they were all called battles, a battle to save Newbury. You know, there's all kinds of analogies with that. So with Oxley's, well, actually, the East London River Crossing was due to go through Oxley's Woods, Shepherdley's Woods, Woodlands Farm, Rockcliffe Gardens, take away masses of housing. I think it was about 200 houses down Wickham Lane, and then cut through another part of Plumstead before it would then join the river. So it was hugely destructive to green spaces locally, and we felt that it would really impact the quality of life for a lot of local people. So we at that time, I do think that one of the key figures was a guy called Jonathan Bray, who came along and was really good at getting us all to sit down and start reaching out to all the other environmental groups that were active. So we had WWF, we had wildlife trusts, and at one point I was working for Campaign to Save, Campaign for the Protection of Rural England in the London branch. So I was able to get them involved. And obviously Friends of the Earth, Greenpeace. So we had this big grouping of people, and we called ourselves the Oxley's Alliance. And the idea was that the road That particular road scheme was going to be the line in the sand, and we would rally people. You know, we had access to hundreds of thousands of people, we had access to the newspapers, television cameras, and so we prepared for the public inquiry found, you know, in favour of the road. We then tried a legal challenge on the basis that they were going to give us new woodland in exchange for ancient woodland. It's very similar to HS2. And that legal challenge again failed, although they did find in our favour on a couple of points, so we weren't liable for costs. We were writing petitions, we were getting letter writing campaigns going, we had postcards printed, we had a lot of campaign materials like t-shirts and prints and books and, you know, all kinds of things to raise money to give us the funds to carry out the campaign. We had done an adopt a tree scheme in the woods, so that and the idea would be that you would come and protect your tree if ever it was needed. We had a beat the bulldozer pledge. And so we were really gearing up. This was the last chances of stopping this road. We were really gearing up for the physical protests when the government just suddenly caved. It was very sudden and quite unexpected, actually, but I think that they realised it would have been incredibly bad publicity. So that's, you know, that's a bit of the context. I think the newspapers at that time were incredibly useful. I don't see them as being so useful these days. And when we were chatting in pre-meet about this, we were talking about the sort of the new technology of video cameras and how a lot of protesters used them against what was happening on site, and the security used them to try and intimidate protesters. But it was interesting to sort of realise that was the start, really. I mean, now everybody is filming things on their mobile phone to make sure they have a record of things. Right, so I think that I have probably gone over, but that was the sort of rough history of the campaign. And we were the only, out of the four that I mentioned, we were the only ones that were successful and got to stop the road. So that's the good news.
That's great. Thanks, Jess. That's really interesting. I love this idea of the Adopt a Tree campaign where everybody pledged to go and protect their tree. I think that's lovely. Thanks very much. Okay, so moving on, our next speaker is going to be James Marriott. And James, I will let you reintroduce yourself in the way that you prefer. Over to you.
Hi there. Can you see my video? I'm not sure. I can just see Jess. Okay, that's cool.
We've got you now.
Okay, okay now. Hi there. I'm James Marriott, and I work as part of Platform, which is a collective that brings together people from the arts, education, and activism. And we have been working on issues to do with climate change and the impacts of oil and gas extraction since the mid-90s. Simon very kindly asked me if I'd be part of this, and I'm delighted to do that. And it sort of links quite usefully to think about the 90s to some work I've been doing recently, which is working on a book called Crude Britannia, which looks at the history of the oil, the impacts of the building of the UK by the oil industry since the 1940s, and how the resistance of civil society has been to that that industry, is how that's unfolded since the 60s. And you can have a look at that. That book's coming out next May. I thought I'd just try and pick up on three particular points that I would draw from the experience of the 90s. Just to say that all of the folks in Platform are very, very inspired by and very involved in the anti-roads protest, particularly at Newbury, as well as a bit at Oxley's Wood, and particularly the M11 campaign. And the anti-roads protest was extremely powerful and extremely important. In a way, isn't done justice by the simple term of anti-roads, because it was much more than that. It was much more powerful in its pushback against the norms of consumption, the norms of the car, the norms of oil in every corner of our society. The three things that I would draw from the experience from the 90s is, first of all, be bold. In the mid-90s, a guy called Mayer Hillman produced a book which he said that what we basically needed at that time was a 90% reduction in carbon dioxide emissions as rapidly as possible in the UK. A 90% reduction in the mid-90s sounded like true madness. So we decided, at Platform, we decided to call our project the 90% Crude, which called for a 90% reduction in CO2 emissions. And we launched that in 95. And in a way, it was a provocation to get people thinking about that. What I find amazing is that now, it's taken a long time, but now the idea of a 90% reduction in CO2 emissions is, as you all know, is fairly well discussed at many different levels of society and government. Not enough, but very well considered now. And so 90% Crude was the way in which we looked at it, and we tried to create pieces of work which demanded that change, that radical change. And so I would urge folks to be bold. The anti-roads protest and Reclaim the Streets was similarly bold in its pushback radically against the ideas of capitalism at the time. It was the late 1990s and early 2000s, where we were in the absolutely roaring days of neoliberalism and before the crash of 2008. So those movements that happened at that time were very bold in their proposal, and I think that's an important thing, and I admire XR for being similarly bold. The second thing I think I would say is avoid being co-opted. I'm sure many of you will know that in the year 2000, BP launched a project called Beyond Petroleum, and they rebranded their company, and they said they were going to become an energy company rather than an oil and gas company. And to give them their due, lots of people at the senior level of the company gave that a serious push. They worked very hard at it. After 7 years, in 2007, beginning of 2005, 2007, that whole project began to wind down. At no point during that 7 to 10 years of pushing for going beyond petroleum did they ever have more than 1% of their turnover that wasn't in oil and gas. So 99% of their turnover remained in oil and gas and fossil fuels, despite the fact that they claimed that they were going beyond petroleum, and despite the fact that many people in the company wanted to make a shift to alternative energy. They basically couldn't turn the machine around. If that went for the same for BP, it was also the same for Shell. Shell bought up a whole chunk of the solar industry, and then just flogged it off. They bought up the largest wind farm in the North Sea and then flogged it off. Everything, ultimately, in the way in which the companies pursued climate change issues, was subject to the fundamental principle of what a corporation is doing, which is to get a return on capital. And everything is subservient to that need, getting a return on capital. So I urge people not to be taken in by, for example, BP's declaration recently that it's going to go beyond petroleum, or it's going to be #net zero. They've done this before. They pushed it for 7 years, and then they gave up and went back to oil. I would happy to talk about it at length, but I see no evidence to see that BP can do that, not follow that same path again now. And as for BP, as for Shell, as for Exxon, we need to work for their extinction. That's what we need to do. The oil and gas corporations need to be rendered extinct. And the third thing I would say is, so don't be taken in, don't be co-opted. Please avoid that. It happened a lot in the 90s and early 2000s. And the third thing I would say is to stay loyal. These things take a long time to shift. In 1995, 9 activists in Ogoniland were hung by the neck and killed by judicial murder. Ken Saro-Wiwa and 8 other activists were hung for their protest against Shell. And this year there was an event which marked 25th anniversary of that, and a whole host of people have been involved in campaigning on trying to change the situation in the Niger Delta, both here and internationally and in Nigeria. And people have been campaigning on that for 25 years. The situation in Ogoniland and in wider Delta has not improved much in that 25 years. The pollution, the depth of pollution in the soil in the Niger Delta is up to the depth of 2 London buses. It's a very, very polluted area. And that's just the soil. I'm not mentioning the water or the gas. We need to understand that the shift from oil and gas is going to take a long time, not just by stopping pulling it out of the ground, but by cleaning out the pollution. It's going to take decades, and we need to remain loyal to it. And I urge folks on this call to really do that and see how long it's going to take and commit to that length of time. I hope that's of some use. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. That's really powerful. Thank you very much. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions for you at the end of this. Swan, I can only see a few people on my screen. Are you with us, my love? Hello. I can't hear you for some reason. Talk again.
Now?
Yes, I can. Over to you then. I'll let you introduce yourself as you see fit, because I know that you wear a few different hats, don't you? Off you go. Off you go.
Sure. My name's Swan, and I'm from HS2 Rebellion, which is a movement of movements as part of Stop HS2 campaign, which is, trying to stop one of the biggest, or the biggest infrastructure since World War I across Europe and in this country, happening right here, right now. It's been going for many years, but it's really fast-tracked over the last 12 months. Obviously, we've heard Boris make loads of speeches about it recently, and it's in the press pretty much every other day at the moment, because they're talking about money and they're talking about commitments and how they're going to create, you know, this amazing train line that's going to create all these jobs, like 20,000 jobs and a million other great things, right? But actually, in reality, they don't really tell you the truth. Okay, so it's massive greenwashing happening. And the reality is the deforestation, the mass wildlife crimes being committed every day, the laws being broken, the brutality, all sorts of things are going down that we aren't aware of because we're locked in our houses in a pandemic, a global pandemic. So they're really, you know, taking the opportunity to fast track this project this year. And so I personally got involved, having spent the last 2 years volunteering for Extinction Rebellion, being sort of really submerged in that world, and then heard about HS2 and what was happening through that. And then when the lockdown happened, I witnessed my friend, you know, on the internet larch, being starved for 8 days whilst he was protesting up a tree along with 10 other people. They weren't allowed water or food or anything like that, to get rid of the waste, human waste. And so that really opened my eyes to what was going on. And so at that moment in time, I felt like I had to be there. And it was really difficult. Obviously, my family were like, you know, all over the place, as everyone's were, because we were going through this mass pandemic. But you know, I also knew that we're in, you know, this climate and ecological emergency, which is, dare I say, even greater than, you know, the pandemic. And this is an exact sort of example of where we're going and how everything's interconnected and this sort of domino effect is happening. So I went along to Crackley Woods, which is in the Warwickshire region, because I'm originally from Nottingham, so it was the closest one. And that's where at the time they'd started felling all the trees in the forest, and the forests are beautiful, so stunning there. And as soon as I put my feet on the ground, something changed, and it was very difficult to describe. But, you know, I've been in nature before millions of times, but there was something different that day, because it's very different to doing protesting in the streets of London in a concrete jungle to activism in nature, right? And it's very hard to describe. The relationship is instantaneous. The sort of visceral feeling that you have fighting for something that you are, that is your home basically, and your sort of connectivity to it, your relationship grows over time. So what happens is your emotional reach and your sort of willingness to protect it obviously grows, and so that emotional connection really is highlighted through the actions that you end up taking, you know, that I've taken. So within sort of you know, the first 48 hours of being there, you know, I was witnessing the brutality of what was going on the ground, and I couldn't, you know, I was really shocked by it. And the first thing I did was get my phone out and document it all, because I wanted to let the world know what was going on. And I wanted the people that were being illegal, right? So we'd spotted a bird in a tree and it was in the compound, and we had professional photographers documenting it. And as soon as that happened, they saw, you know, us focusing in on that and reporting it to the wildlife police. And as soon as we'd started doing that, they started moving the fencing. So they moved the fencing, so it was behind us. So we then became inside the compound. Okay. Then they call the cops. And so then we're being illegal, right? Because we're on their land, in their compound, even though we're sort of seeing this wildlife crime about to be committed, you know, because we've got chainsaws at the ready, right? And so that was just on the second day. And now this is an everyday occurrence for me, because I live on a camp. So I live at Denham Wildlife Protection Camp, which is on the outskirts of London. If you go to Uxbridge on the Metropolitan line, you'll get there, and it's beautiful. You really wouldn't expect it to be right a stone's throw away from London, but it's so stunning. And this is how all of these sort of areas are that they're felling, and so it's sort of like, you know, that instant falling in love. And then what do you do when you see the love of your life being destroyed every single day? It's like you're going through this grief, like this continual waves of grief. And you know, we're calling the police and trying to get them to account for these wildlife crimes being committed, and in these very special places. And the police aren't coming. And the police aren't responding. And then when they are coming, they come and they're on the other side of the fence, right? So the first people they speak to when something happens, anything happens, is HS2. And we're lucky if they come and speak to us. And maybe some community officers do. And yeah, it's, you know, we're talking, just to put it on a scale of things, we're talking 108 ancient woodlands, 693 wildlife sites, 33 sites of special scientific interest, 5 internationally important wildlife sites, and they're all protected by UK law, or so they say. And so then we've also got the people that this affects. So you've got 2,000 homes and businesses have been displaced by this. So that means, as a result of that, you're talking 19,500 jobs were lost or displaced due to this project. So that number is very similar to the one that Boris has obviously announced, that he's created 20,000 jobs, right? But actually what you don't hear is the amount he's displaced, which is basically the same amount. And guess how much you're paying for that? So a total of £6,000 per person, per taxpayer, that's how much it's approximately estimated to cost, but the costs are going up every single day. And so it's sort of spiraling out of control. And this is part of that sort of old world capitalistic structures that they're relying on these big infrastructure projects to create, these, corporate deals across the borders and in, in our backyard. And so that's sort of thing that we're fighting every day. And then you've got the brutality, which many of you might have seen, I'm not sure, online. There's lots of videos and things like that. We try and, as I said, communicate as much as possible with what's going on. I've never witnessed anything like it in my life before until I've been there. And I really wasn't expecting it. But the corporations have so much control because it's a government-led project that they can acquire any land, and they basically get the police to become the security guards of the project. Now they pay for security as well, so you've got HS2 security, then you've got the people called the NET, which is a national eviction team, which are basically paid bouncers by their courts. And they're there 24/7. They're doing jobs that they're not actually meant to be doing, as well as the others. So they're subcontracted basically by HS2. And they're the real sort of bullies that you see. They're all ex-military trained, or they've worked because of the pandemic. And most of the people that are security are people that have lost their jobs to festivals, like security guys, or like the music industry, nightclubs, this kind of thing, or they're military and they can't get work on that either, like ex-military. So what I'm trying to paint the picture here is they're not using necessarily, like, the powers that they have is like with force, but it's not. The way that they use it is a lot more extreme than they should be, basically. So what I mean by that, if I was to give some examples, is people up trees, 30, 40 feet up trees, and the national eviction team will come in and essentially pull you out of a tree. They'll go up in a cherry picker, or they'll climb up, and then they'll essentially fight with you like a rugby tackle, or they'll use certain, what do you call it? I don't know what you call it, when, touch points, pressure points, to demobilize you. So for example, in the first 2 weeks that I was there, Lodge's son was there. He's at the time, I think he was 19, and he was up one of those trees in a tree house, and he'd taken off his harness, and he was in like a net, and they put him in a lock, and a choke lock, and so he was unconscious for 7 seconds. Now he's completely peaceful protester, and he was not like trying to fight them at all, was talking to them, like trying to sort of talk them through, that he was peaceful and he wasn't trying to run away or anything like that. And that's what they did to basically get him out. And so that's the sort of thing that happens on a sort of, way too often. But it also extends to the police. And I honestly didn't expect that. I mean, I know people tell me these things, but so I nearly lost my life, for example. There was a time when we had a tree on the other side of the river, and it wasn't in a compound, and it's next to our camp. The camp's parallel to the compound, and we put a line attached to this tree that we knew was ancient, and we knew it wasn't on the plans to be felled, but we also had intel that they were going to chop it down. So we put a line attached from one to the other, a walkway, and basically someone was in the tree, and then we had other people on the lines above the river, sat on there, on harnesses, safety on and everything. And then some other people stood on the edge, like next to it. So the day before this happened, and they cut, the HS2 workers, the NET and the security, cut the line, even though we made them aware that people were on it. And so people fell into the water, and one of those people had to go to hospital, and then half an hour after being in hospital was arrested, even though they were sort of dragged out of the water and they weren't attached with a harness to the rope. Then the following day, we put up another line, like a metal line, and myself and Larch and some other people went up there. This time I called the press. You know, we did a massive, you know, outreach for support to come to help us, and we called the police and various different people. They sent loads of different organizations. So they had 3 different police forces there. They had gold, silver, bronze, you know, you name it, they were there that day, fire brigade. And they spent all day trying to work out how to get me down safely. They had one guy up, put a rope across, and then they were trying to, you know, get across to me and then like bring me down, which I would have done because I am a peaceful protester. They tried negotiating with me, and I said I was happy to come down if they could return all of our belongings that HS2 had taken after an eviction, an illegal eviction, and not returned to us 2 months prior to that. Instead, we got an email saying that they were going to what do you call it? Burn it all, basically, including someone's passport. So I said, well, I'm happy to come down if you can return all our belongings today, please, because you've said you're going to burn them. The answer was no. So instead they got the chainsaw and started chopping down the tree whilst I was still attached to the tree. And then eventually the police couldn't work out how to do it. So about 5 p.m. in the afternoon, they cut the line anyway, like HS2 had done the previous day, and risked my life, like they'd risked other people's lives. And I fell. Luckily, I'm still alive and I was okay. But the paramedics said that they'd seen, you know, it was about 25 foot above the ground, and it was a shallow stone river. And they said they'd witnessed people drop at shorter heights and be either paralyzed or worse. So pretty much my sort of attitude, or whatever the right word is, trust maybe, changed overnight that day for me personally. And I think it shocked a lot of people witnessing it online. And it was, I think it was a massive wake-up call for the movement. Many supporters came as a result of seeing that. And then we've had many other things happen like that since, like evictions at Jones's Wood. You might have heard about that. And they've since found stuff like bats. And we've got ecologists, you know, reporting evidence, which is really great, because that gives us another sort of inroads to hold them account for the ecocides that they're committing, right? The more evidence that we can find, the better. So we're trying to work with things like that. I'm not sure how long I should be speaking for. So
we're about ready for you to wrap up and have our last speaker on, because I'm sure we're going to have lots and lots of questions for everybody after that. That's really powerful stuff, Sam. Swan, thanks. thanks very much for that. Sarah, are you ready to talk a little bit about activism in the pandemic and what you've been up to?
Yes, but oh, I can't see myself. Am I okay? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can't. You've not moved onto the screen for some reason.
Oh, hang on.
Let me see if I can find you and pin you.
Okay. Yeah.
Is your video on?
Yes, it me?
Let me find you.
Well, I can see
Oh.
myself.
I can see you.
Okay, let me.
Here you go, I've
Stop
pinned
like
you.
that. There we go.
Thank you. I don't think it's fair to have me on after Sam and what's after Swan and what's happening at the HS2. Yeah, so I feel a little dowdy and meek after all of that, and just, you know, such gratitude to all of the HS2 rebellion, and also actually a whole heap of respect for the first two speakers as well, because, you know, I think we have to recognise that we stand on the shoulders of the people who came before us, the stuff that we're doing now. So I've agreed and stepped in to replace Robin Boardman, who was meant to be speaking today. And so yeah, if I get a little lost, please forgive me, because I didn't have very much time to prepare. So I will talk about the CEE bill. And the CEE bill was, if you like, midwifed in Extinction Rebellion, and it was developed from a piece of legislation that we drew up, a piece of parliamentary legislation we drew up called the Three Demands Bill, that we'd hoped that would get presented before Parliament, and it never really went anywhere. And the bill has since been reincarnated, and an alliance has formed around it, with various people have come on board to support it, who might not have supported it as Extinction Rebellion, but are prepared to support it as the Bill Alliance. The bill's been tabled. It's got 81 MPs who are publicly prepared to support the bill. There's a website. If you Google the Climate and Ecological Emergency Bill, it'll take you to the website, and it will explain what the bill's about. It's got three main areas. One is that our carbon emissions should be in line with the 2018 1.5 special report, and that those emissions should not be falsely expanded, allowing the use, or based on the use of negative emission technologies, to just come along and suck the carbon that we emit today out of the air tomorrow. That burden should not be placed on future generations. It recognises that part of the way that we deal with the climate and ecological crisis is the way that we deal with the crisis of ecology and biodiversity as well, and that we have to take steps to repair the natural world so it becomes a thriving place, and that what we do and how we live no longer damages the planet. And then, so that this can actually happen and that we don't end up with a counter-rebellion, we actually say that the policies that go forward have to be drawn up by the representation of the United Kingdom, of the public, and we do that via a citizens' assembly. So it's absolutely based, embedded in what Extinction Rebellion was calling for, but it has been put into parliamentary language, and it's been based on the science. So we got ecologists to come and speak to us to help draft it. We got deliberative democracy experts to come along, and we also got climate experts to come along. And so Kevin Anderson, for example, of the Tyndale Centre, helped draft the bill. So it's absolutely based in the science, based in the accepted science that the government's agreed to, which makes it very strong. So when you go and ask people to support it, you're basing it on what the IPCC says. I know there's problems with the IPCC, and I'm not going to dispute any of that, but it gives us a starting point to call for action, and it gives us a way of framing what that action is called for that is not disputed. When you start saying there is no place for nets, that you have to include consumption emissions, that you have to include shipping and aviation emissions, what happens is you're closing down those loopholes which the developed countries have put in place to kick that climate can down the road. So the bill provides a mechanism for change. So how are you going to make it law? Brilliant, great idea, Sarah. Well done. You've got a presentation. Bill's got no hope of becoming law. So, you know, there's no point in me supporting it, is there? Well, The 2008 Climate Change Act, which in a way the bill is an updated version of, started off as a presentation bill. So if anyone tells you it's got no chance of becoming law, actually presentation bills do change law. They change the debate, they change the conversation, they move the Overton window around particular issues, and sometimes they do become law if they have enough support. Support at constituency level, putting pressure on the MPs as constituents. Support at national level, so from the national organisations, nationally important figures, people, you know, like it'd be brilliant if David King came out and supported the bill, for example, but we do have people like Doug Parr of Greenpeace who's come out and said that this is what needs to be considered, what's in this bill. We've got Rob Hopkins of the Transition Town Alliance who supported the bill. We've got Safir Mini who set up People Tree, who said this is the way we need to go. So various people and groups are, the Beavers Trust, we've got to love the Beavers Trust. The Beavers Trust support the bill. So at national level, you get people to support. And then on sort of the MPs level, who are the people that the individual MPs or the individual parties are talking to? So, for example, local WIs, local churches, local business leaders, if they come out and start supporting the bill, then you start putting pressure on them that way. So the way to make, for us as civil society, to change the law is to make the pressure on the MPs so great that they have to basically cave in to it, that they're shown to be out of step with the culture of the country and out of step with what their constituents want to the point that they fear to lose their seat. The 2008 Climate Change Act was really quite remarkable in that it was not opposed. I think there were 3 MPs who refused to vote for it. And that level of unity is really what we need to strive for again in supporting the CEE. But the bill has traction and has legs because of the space that was opened up by Extinction Rebellion. So the Extinction, although being part of the Bill Alliance, I kind of like have to accept that we're not going to be I'm not part of a group anymore that's going to take part in non-violent direct action. But the bill works because non-violent direct action is taking place, because that space is being opened up and is being continually contested. Otherwise, people would not be coming and looking at the bill. I had a conversation today with someone who's actually looking at doing some stuff around COP, and he basically said that to me, accepted that, and said that he's actually been talking to some of those like trusted commentators on the right, and asking them to debate and consider the bill, because of XR, and because it's bedded in the science. And I think I'm going to stop there, because I could carry on talking. I will cover one more aspect actually. So what's it got to do with activism? Well, although as a CEE Bill Alliance we are legitimate in that we are not standing up as the alliance and declaring rebellion and saying that we are prepared to break the law, but the fact is that anyone can come and support us and offer their support. And obviously the September rebellion very demonstrated, was about the bill and about supporting the bill. So the Bill Alliance absolutely recognises and welcomes the support of Extinction Rebellion, even as we take a more legitimate route of setting up meetings, with various trusted commentators. And so if local groups want to go and take direct action against their MPs in whatever way they may see fit, then that's totally within their right to do that. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers everything that I want to say. Although I would suggest that we start off with face-to-face meetings. yeah, I think that's me done, Sarah.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Wow, there's so much to digest from the last 45, 50 minutes. We've heard so much. So we've got about half